The pod shuddered as it punched through the outer membrane of the transit lane, and Commander Sierra Vasquez gripped the armrest hard enough to feel the bones in her fingers. Through the forward viewport, stars smeared into white threads, then snapped back into points. The navigation array chimed twice, the sound it made when it found something it recognized. Earth Sol 3, Origin. She had not seen it in 47,000 years. The cryogenic suspension had done what it was designed to do. Her body was 39 years old, same as the day she had climbed into the long sleep chamber aboard the Meridian. Her mind carried every memory from before the departure. The smell of wet asphalt in Houston after rain, the sound of her daughter Alina asking when she would come home, the weight of the mission brief in her hands when they told her the Meridian was a one-way trip to the Sagittarius Relay, humanity's first deep-range survey vessel, launched into a corridor no probe had ever returned from. The Meridian had returned. The crew had not. Sierra was the last one still breathing, the sole survivor of a 47,000-year drift through a collapsed relay that had folded her trajectory back toward Sol like a letter being resealed. The ship's AI had woken her 6 hours ago, its synthetic voice carrying something she had never heard in it before. Hesitation. "Commander," the AI had said, "I have located Sol, but the system does not match any record in my database." Sierra had pulled herself out of the cryopod, joints cracking, throat raw, and walked barefoot to the bridge. The main display showed Sol yellow, familiar, the right spectral signature, the right position relative to Barnard's star and Alpha Centauri. But everything else was wrong. The asteroid belt was gone. Not scattered, gone. In its place hung a continuous ring of structures, each segment the size of a small moon, linked by luminous filaments that pulsed with a slow, rhythmic light. Jupiter's moons had been rearranged. Io was missing entirely. Europa had been moved closer to Ganymede, and both were encased in something translucent that caught the sun and threw rainbows across the void. "What happened here?" she whispered. The AI did not answer. It had been trying to establish contact with any local network for 3 hours and had received nothing. No hail, no challenge, no automated beacon. Just a silence so complete it felt architectural, as if someone had designed the quiet. Sierra guided the Meridian inward on manual thrust, past the ring where the asteroid belt had been. Up close, the structures were not stations. They were foundries. Massive, dormant foundries with cooling vents the size of canyons and docking cradles large enough to hold vessels that dwarfed the Meridian 1,000 times over. Every surface was covered in script she did not recognize, angular, precise, etched into alloy that her sensors could not identify. The foundries were cold. Whatever they had been building, they had finished. A second anomaly registered on the scanner as she cleared the ring. A field not electromagnetic, not gravitational, something her instruments could not classify rippled outward from the inner system like a net being drawn tight. The Meridian's hull pinged twice as the field washed over it. A scan. Something had just read her ship from bow to stern in less than a second, cataloged every component, every system, every molecule of fuel in her tanks. She knew this because a tertiary display she had never seen activate before lit up with a single line of text in a language she did not know, followed by a translation that the Meridian's AI provided in a flat, bewildered tone. Vessel identified, registry, UNDRS Meridian. Class pre-expansion survey, status, returning. Returning, as if the system had been waiting for her. She passed Mars next. The planet was green. Not the false green of algae blooms or atmospheric tinting green the way Virginia was green in April, the way the hills outside her grandmother's house had been green when she was 6 years old. Forests covered the northern hemisphere. Rivers glinted in the sunlight. And on the equator, where Olympus Mons should have risen like a bruise on the planet's face, there was a city. It covered the entire caldera. Towers rose from its center that were visible from orbit, their surfaces catching the light and refracting it into colors that did not exist in the natural spectrum. Transit lines radiated outward from the city like the spokes of a wheel, each one a ribbon of light stretching to the horizon. Sierra's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat on the console and breathed. "Meridian," she said, "are there any human biosignatures on Mars?" 17 billion, the AI said, approximate. She sat with that number for a full minute. 17 billion on a planet that had been dead rock and red dust when she left. She pulled up the scanner and swept the Martian system. Phobos and Deimos were still there, but modified. Phobos was encased in a lattice of docking infrastructure, its surface bristling with communication arrays and what looked like defensive emplacements. Deimos had been hollowed out. Through the scanner's resolution she could see the interior, a shipyard. The dry dock cradles held 3 vessels, each one larger than any warship she had ever studied, their hulls still showing the dull sheen of fresh alloy. They were building more. Saturn stopped her cold. The rings were still there, the natural ones, but threaded through them, following the same orbital plane, were structures. Long, narrow platforms, each 100s of kilometers in length, their surfaces studded with emitter arrays that pointed outward toward the void. Weapons platforms. She counted 40 before the scanner's resolution failed. There could have been thousands. They hung among the ice and rock of Saturn's rings like needles in a haystack, invisible unless you knew what to look for. The AI identified them as Vigil-class defense stations. It could not tell her when they had been built, or by whom, or what they were designed to fire at. It could only tell her that each one was broadcasting a low-frequency identification pulse that carried a single repeating phrase in a language the AI's translation matrix could barely parse. Still watching, she turned the Meridian toward Earth. It filled the viewport the way it had filled her dreams, blue and white and achingly familiar. But as the pod drew closer, she saw the differences. The coastlines had changed. Sea levels had risen and then been pushed back. She could see the scars of ancient flood barriers, now buried under new growth, running along what had been the eastern seaboard. The Amazon basin was wider. The Sahara was smaller, its edges softened by belts of engineered forest that stretched in precise geometric patterns. And above it all, hanging in low orbit like a second moon, was a ship. It was not a ship the way the Meridian was a ship. The Meridian was 100 meters long, a needle of alloy and ceramic designed to carry 12 people across interstellar distances. This vessel was 11 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull was a deep, matte gray, textured with overlapping scales, each scale a weapons platform or sensor array or docking bay. Running lights traced its spine in a slow cascade of amber and white. 3 more like it were visible at the edge of her scanner's range, holding station above the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, and the Arctic. Her scanner chirped again. The field she had encountered at the asteroid ring was stronger here, concentrated, layered. She could feel it, a faint pressure against the hull, like the Meridian was being held in a cupped hand, not restrained, guided. The pressure was gentle, almost courteous, adjusting its grip as the Meridian adjusted course. "Meridian to unidentified vessel," Sierra transmitted on every frequency. "This is Commander Sierra Vasquez, United Nations Deep Range Survey Program. I am requesting permission to enter Earth orbit." Static, then a sound she had not heard in 47 millennia, a human voice. "Meridian, this is Earth Orbital Authority, Platform Kepler. We have you on scope. Please hold position and stand by for escort." The voice was calm, professional. The accent was unlike anything she had ever heard, the vowels shaped differently, the consonants harder, as if the language had been ground smooth by 10,000 years of use and then rebuilt from its bones. But it was English. "Copy, Kepler," she said, her voice cracked. "Commander Vasquez, for your awareness, you've been identified by the homecoming protocol. Escort craft are en route. Welcome home." 2 craft detached from the warship above. Small, fast, shaped like elongated teardrops with forward-swept stabilizers trailing luminous vapor. They fell into formation on either side of the meridian with the organic precision of pilots who had trained together for years. Through the side viewport, Sierra could see the nearest pilot, human. Dark-skinned, close-cropped hair, wearing a flight suit that shifted color as she moved. The pilot looked at her through the canopy and raised one hand. Sierra raised her hand back and felt something break open in her chest. They brought her down through the atmosphere in a controlled descent that felt nothing like the re-entry profiles she had trained for. No heat bloom, no shuddering deceleration. The escort craft projected a field around the meridian that absorbed the friction entirely. She descended through clouds that parted ahead of them. Below, the surface spread out in staggering detail. The coastline she was approaching had once been the mid-Atlantic. She recognized the shape the Chesapeake Bay, the Delmarva Peninsula, but everything on it was new. A city stretched from Old Washington to Old Norfolk, a continuous landscape of towers and parkland and transit corridors. The built environment blended with the natural one so seamlessly she could not tell where the city ended and the forest began. The towers were organic, grown in spiraling forms that caught the wind. Parks filled the spaces between them with lakes and amphitheaters. And defense systems. She could see them now concealed in the architecture, woven into the landscape like veins beneath skin. Platforms disguised as observation decks. Arrays built into the spiraling towers, emitters masked by panels that could retract in seconds. A grid of ground-based installations along the old flood barriers, each large enough to house a weapon that could reach orbit. The beauty was real, but it was also armor. The escort brought her down on a landing platform at the edge of the Chesapeake, a wide disk of white composite set into a hillside overlooking the water. As the meridian settled with a soft hydraulic sigh, Sierra saw people gathering. Dozens, then hundreds. She sat in the pilot's seat for a long time. Through the viewport, the crowd stood quietly, watching, not cheering, not waving, watching the way you watch something you have been waiting for. The hatch cycled open. Salt air flooded the cabin, mixed with cut grass and something floral. The temperature was perfect, not spacecraft perfect, but Earth perfect, as if the planet itself had decided what the air should feel like. Sierra stood, her legs trembled, she stepped out onto the ramp. The gravity was the same. After 47,000 years, Earth's gravity was exactly what her body remembered. A woman stepped forward from the crowd. Taller than Sierra by a head, with silver hair and amber eyes Sierra had never seen in a human iris. She wore a dark tunic with a single insignia on the collar, a circle bisected by a vertical line in gold thread. "Commander Vasquez," the woman said, "my name is Leon Acoffer. I hold the chair of remembrance for the Atlantic Reach. We have been expecting you." "Expecting me?" "The Meridian's transponder has been tracked since it re-entered the heliosphere 9 days ago. When we identified the vessel's registry, we activated the homecoming protocol. It has not been used in 11,000 years. But it was ready." Sierra looked past Leon at the crowd. Their faces were patient. Some of the older ones had tears on their cheeks. A boy near the front clutched a small device projecting a holographic image she could not quite make out. "The Meridian's mission was classified," Sierra said. "The relay collapsed behind us. There was no way to know we survived." Leon tilted her head, a gesture that reminded Sierra of her old flight instructor. "Walk with me. There is something you should see." They followed a path through engineered trees with spiraling trunks and canopies that filtered sunlight into amber glow. The crowd followed at a respectful distance. The escort pilots walked behind Leon, hands clasped, eyes forward. The path ended at a cliff overlooking the Chesapeake Bay. The bay was wider than Sierra remembered, the water deep and clear. On the far shore the city continued, towers and transit ribbons threading between them. the landscape humming with a low-frequency vibration she could feel in her teeth. At the base of the cliff, set into the rock face, was a wall, something that looked like black glass but was not too deep, too still, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. The wall stretched 100 meters in either direction, rose 20 meters to the cliff edge. On its surface, in characters that glowed with steady white light, were names. Tens of thousands of names. The characters were in the old script, the Latin alphabet, the same letter forms from Sierra's mission brief and flight suit. Arranged in columns, each headed by a date and mission designation. She found the meridian in the third column. Deep Range Survey Vessel Meridian. Launch 2089 CE. Crew 12. 12 names below: Hernandez, Volkov, Obi, Park, Delacroix, Tanaka, Ferraro, Singh, Whitfield, Mbue, Reyes, Vasquez. Her name on a wall on Earth, carved there while she slept. The wall of departure, Leon said. Every crew that launched and did not return. Built in 2341 CE when the last early deep range mission was declared lost. Maintained continuously since. Every name checked against original records once per century. The material does not degrade. The script does not dim. Sierra pressed her fingers against the wall. It was warm body temperature. Her name's glow intensified at her touch. Hernandez died on the transit, she said quietly. Cryopod failure 300 years in. Volkov and Obi reached the relay terminus, but conditions on the other side were not survivable. Park and Delacroix hull breached during the return trajectory. The others, their pods failed at different points during the drift. I was the last one the system could sustain. She withdrew her hand. Their remains are aboard the Meridian, in the cryobay. They will be brought home, Leon said, each of them with their names spoken. They walked along the wall in silence. Sierra counted columns as they passed. 78 missions. 78 crews who had launched from a young Earth and never returned. Some names carried annotations, dates of confirmed loss, wreckage locations, memorial notes. Others had none. They had gone into the dark, and the dark had kept them. Near the 42nd column, Sierra stopped. A name she recognized. Commander David Chen, DRSV Pathfinder, launched 2087 CE, 2 years before the Meridian. Chen had been her instructor at the academy. He had taught her to read stellar cartography by hand, without instruments, the way ancient sailors read the stars. He had told her once that the point of exploration was not to find something new, but to make the unknown into the known, to push the boundary of what humanity could call its own. His name glowed the same steady white as all the others. 47,000 years, and the wall had not forgotten him either. What happened to Earth? She asked again. What happened while I was gone? Leon turned toward the city. We were visited. Visited. 300 years after the Meridian departed, a fleet entered the Sol system. The Davari Compact, a multi-species alliance from the Carina Arm. They had been surveying this region for millennia. They expected a pre-spaceflight civilization burning fossil fuels and fighting over territory. What they found was a species that had already launched deep-range missions and was building orbital infrastructure. What did they do? Observed, cataloged, left monitoring probes in the outer system, filed a report classifying Earth as a developing world not yet ready for contact, not yet a threat but worth watching. Their projected timeline for humanity to reach interstellar capability was 40,000 years. 40,000 years. They were wrong by a significant margin. Leon's expression did not change, but something hardened behind her eyes. It was the look of a person reciting history that was also personal facts carved into the identity of the species, the way the names were carved into the wall. Humanity reached interstellar capability within 2,000 years of your departure, not by accident and not by genius, by patience, the accumulation of small advances compounded over generations. The decision, made early and held fiercely, that the species would not fracture into competing factions fighting over scraps of one planet. They had stepped onto a transit platform that carried them into the city proper. From here the scale was staggering. The towers were ecosystems, vertical landscapes of living material, surfaces covered in vegetation, interiors visible through transparent sections showing parks, workshops, laboratories, all connected by walkways and lifts and currents of air that carried people between levels like leaves in a gentle updraft. The Consolidation Wars ended in 2203, Leon said, the last territorial conflict on Earth's surface. After that, the species turned outward. Mars terraformed by 2600, the belt industrialized by 3100, Alpha Centauri reached in 3340, by 5000 CE 47 systems settled, by 10,200, by 20,500. Everyone they passed looked at Sira. A woman carrying an infant paused and held the child up, as if wanting it to see. A man in a workman's tunic pressed his fist to his chest, a salute Sira did not recognize, but its meaning was unmistakable. An older woman simply stopped walking and stood with both hands clasped in front of her, her lips moving silently. Some form of blessing, or a prayer, or simply the act of acknowledging something she had been raised to expect but never thought she would witness. The Davari returned in 7200 CE, Leon continued. A larger fleet this time. A formal diplomatic mission with military escort. They expected a civilization that had perhaps mastered basic fusion and begun to colonize its nearest neighbor. Instead, they found a species controlling 200 systems, with an Uit cloud shipyard network capable of producing warships by the thousand, and weapons technologies the Compact had never encountered. What kind of weapons? Directed energy platforms that disrupted molecular bonds at ranges the Compact considered theoretical. Field generators that compressed space around a target vessel until its hull collapsed under its own structural load. Drone swarms operating on communication, protocols the Compact could not detect, intercept, or jam. The specifics have evolved over the millennia, but the principle has not changed. Every weapons system we develop is designed to make the cost of aggression against Earth so catastrophic that no rational actor would attempt it. What did the Davari want? Terms, they were not hostile, not initially, but their governance was hierarchical, species classified by technological tier, rights assigned accordingly. Humanity had skipped several tiers. They wanted us in the Compact full membership, subordinate status, advisory voice, no vote, military integration under their command, civilian technology transfers at their discretion. And humanity said no. Humanity said no. And then we showed them the fleet. They stopped at the edge of an open plaza, vast, circular, paved in white stone with a single structure at its center. A spire, impossibly thin, rising until its tip vanished in the upper atmosphere. Made of the same dark material as the wall, its surface covered in glowing script, not names but numbers, coordinates, dates. Every system humanity had reached, every outpost established, every defense platform activated. The record spiraled upward, each line finer than the last, until the text was too fine to read with the naked eye. Sira stood at its base. The vibration came up through her boots, a low hum like a heartbeat measured in centuries. After our refusal, Leon said, their military commander requested a demonstration. He believed our refusal was a bluff, a young species overestimating its own capabilities. Our defense coordinator, Dara Osai, a position roughly equivalent to your era's admiral, agreed. She activated the threshold protocol, which was 1% of the fleet brought out of standby, 4,300 vessels positioned in defensive formation around the inner system. The Davari had brought 600. Their military commander transmitted one message back to the Compact after the formation completed: revise all projections, immediately. 1%. The rest remained in Uit cloud shipyards, deep system anchorages, and fold space reserves the Davari did not know existed. We have never revealed the full fleet. No external species has ever seen more than 3% of humanity's military capacity at one time. How many ships? Leon looked at her steadily. More than enough. They crossed the plaza. The spire rose above them, its surface alive with the slow pulse of updated coordinates, new outposts confirmed, new defense platforms coming online, the record growing even now, even as they walked beneath it. Leon told her the rest. The Davari had returned periodically, every few thousand years, always with a larger fleet, always with a revised assessment. Each time the gap had widened. By 15,000 CE, the compact reclassified humanity as a peer power. By 25,000, they reclassified again. Humanity was no longer a peer. It was something they had no category for. They called us a remembering species, Leon said. The closest translation their language could produce. They meant we did not forget injuries, losses, or promises. That we built preparations into our civilization's bedrock the way other species built temples or marketplaces. That everything we constructed, every city, every ship, every orbital platform was built with the memory of having once been small, once been alone, once been left behind by a universe that did not care whether we survived. A man approached from the crowd that had followed them across the plaza, older, with weathered hands and a lined face. He wore no insignia, but the escort pilots straightened when they saw him. He stopped 3 paces from Sira and stood in silence for a moment. My family kept a record, he said, handed down, generation to generation, for 44,000 years. The record says that a woman from the Meridian crew saved my ancestor's life during the pre-launch quarantine. She noticed an equipment malfunction in his cryopod during calibration and flagged it before he climbed in. His name was Ade Mbiwe. Sira blinked. Mbiwe, he was our payload specialist. I ran the calibration checks. There was a seal failure on his pod's thermal regulator. I caught it during the second pass. The man nodded. He did not fly the Meridian. He was reassigned to the Harbinger mission. Because of you, he survived. Because he survived, he met my ancestor. Because they met, my family exists. 44,000 years of children, engineers, teachers, soldiers, all traceable to a seal failure you caught during a second pass. He pressed his fist to his chest. Then he stepped back into the crowd. Sira stared after him. The weight of it settled on her shoulders like a physical thing. The idea that a routine check she had run in a sterile lab in Houston, a check she barely remembered, had branched outward through 44,000 years of consequence into a living man standing in a plaza on an Earth she did not recognize. How many stories like that are there? She asked. The archive holds 11,000 documented lineage traces to the Meridian crew's pre-launch interactions alone, Leon said. Your crew's influence extends further than you know. Another figure emerged from the crowd before they could move on, a woman, younger than the man, with the rangy build and sun-weathered complexion of someone who spent her working hours outdoors or in orbit. She carried no device, no holographic display. She simply walked up to Sira and stood before her. My name is Rin Delacroix Haste, she said, 7th-generation descendant of Lieutenant Yale Delacroix. Sira felt something twist in her stomach. Delacroix, Yale had been the Meridian structural engineer. She was the one who had held the hull together during the return trajectory, working in vacuum with a patched suit, sealing the breach that had killed Park. She had saved the ship. The effort had cost her, the exposure had damaged her pod seal, and her cryogenic suspension had failed 9,000 years later. Sira had been awake for that failure. She had watched the vital signs flatline on the monitoring panel and been unable to do anything but log the time and close the file. Yale saved the ship, Sira said. She sealed a hull breach during the return transit. Without her, none of us would have made it back into the relay corridor. The exposure damaged her pod. She died at year 9,400 of the drift. Rin de Lacroix nodded. Her jaw was set, her eyes steady. The archive has her service record, but it does not have the details you just gave me. It does not know she sealed the breach. It does not know the breach killed Park. It does not know that the effort cost her pod. It does now, Leon said quietly. The archive is recording this conversation. Everything Commander Vasquez says about the Meridian crew becomes part of the permanent record. Every detail she adds completes a file that has been incomplete for 47,000 years. Rin looked at Sierra. Then I am asking you, when the time is right, tell us everything. Every detail you remember about every crew member. What they said, what they did, what they were afraid of, what made them laugh. The archive has their names and their mission profiles. But you are the only person alive who has their voices. Sierra held the woman's gaze. Yale Delacroix had had a laugh that sounded like a bark, short, explosive, always surprising coming from someone so precise and methodical. She had kept a journal during the pre-launch quarantine, handwritten in a leather-bound notebook, because she said that digital records were too easy to delete, and she wanted something that would resist her own second-guessing. She had told Sierra once that the thing she feared most about the mission was not dying, but being forgotten, that the relay would swallow them, and no one would ever know they had been there at all. I will tell you everything, Sierra said, every one of them. Rin pressed her fist to her chest, the same salute the workman had given. Then she stepped back. 3 more people came forward over the next few minutes. A child no more than 10 who announced solemnly that she was learning about the Meridian in school and wanted to know if Commander Vasquez had really been scared during the launch, because her teacher said that brave people were always scared, and she wanted to know if that was true. A retired defense platform officer who said nothing at all but simply stood at attention, held the salute for 5 seconds and walked away. And an elderly man who clasped Sierra's hand in both of his and said, in a voice that shook, "My great-grandmother used to say that the Meridian crew were the bravest people who ever lived. I never believed her. I think she would like to know that I believe her now." Each encounter lasted less than a minute. Each one left a mark. By the time the last person stepped back into the crowd, Sierra felt as if she had been carrying something heavy for a very long time, and someone had finally told her she was allowed to set it down. A chime sounded across the plaza, low, resonant, felt more than heard. People throughout the city paused. Sierra watched a woman on a nearby walkway close her eyes for a moment, then continue walking. A child looked up at the sky and pointed at the warship overhead. "Vigil chime," Leon said. "Sounds once every 6 hours. A reminder, not of a specific threat, of the principle of attention. That vigilance is not a reaction to danger but a habit of character." "You said the compact dissolved 9,000 years ago," Sierra said. "Internal pressures, succession conflicts. The usual arc of empires grown too large to sustain their own weight. Several constituent species joined humanity's network voluntarily. Others retreated to home systems. The Davari themselves still occupy a cluster in the Carina arm. Diplomatic relations maintained. They are not a threat. They have not been a threat for a very long time. But you still have the fleet." "We still have the fleet. We still maintain the shipyards. We still train the crews. We still develop new systems. Not because the Davari might return, because memory is not a burden we set down. The generation that survives a flood does not stop building levees because the river is calm." They crossed to the far side of the plaza, where the white stone gave way to a garden not decorative but working, with rows of plants Sierra did not recognize and trellises heavy with fruit in colors she had no words for. People moved through the rows, tending and harvesting. Children played between the trellises, their laughter carrying on the salt wind from the bay. Leon stopped at the garden's edge. Beside the garden ran a low wall of the same dark glass-like material, and set into it was a series of small niches, each one containing a physical object, a piece of corroded metal, a fragment of ceramic tile, a sliver of optical cable dulled by age. Sierra recognized the materials. They were from early-era spacecraft, pre-expansion hardware, the kind of components that had been state-of-the-art when the Meridian launched. Relics, Leon said, noticing her gaze. From the first vessels, the Pathfinder, the Resolve, the Equinox, the Meridian, each piece was recovered from wreckage or from vessels that returned empty. They are maintained here as physical anchors, proof that the digital records correspond to real objects, real ships, real people. The archive preserves data. The garden preserves things you can touch. Sierra reached out and brushed her fingers against a fragment of hull plating. It was small enough to fit in her palm, scorched along one edge, with a serial number still faintly visible. She did not recognize the specific piece, but she recognized the alloy. It was the same composite that made up the Meridian's outer hull. "This is from one of ours," she said. The Meridian's relay probe. It was recovered from the Sagittarius terminus in 4200 CE when a follow-up expedition reached the relay and found the debris field. They brought back what they could. The probe's data core was intact. It contained the last telemetry the Meridian transmitted before the relay collapsed: navigational data, environmental readings, crew vitals. Your vital signs were the last ones the core recorded. Heart rate 62. Blood oxygen 97%. Core temperature steady. "I was asleep," Sierra said. "You were alive. That was what the core told us." The last reading from the Meridian said that at least one crew member was still alive, and so we waited. Sierra looked at the relic, at the serial number on the hull fragment, at the garden growing around it. A piece of her ship, planted in the earth of a world that had spent 47,000 years growing past the horizon of everything she understood. And still the fragment sat here, tended and labeled and remembered, because the people who found it had decided that even a scrap of metal from a lost ship was worth keeping, not for its material value, for its meaning. "There is something else the protocol requires me to share," Leon said. "It concerns the reason the protocol exists." Sierra waited. In 9400 CE, a survey vessel called the Nightingale re-entered the Sol system after 18,000 years of drift. Similar trajectory to yours, collapsed relay, folded return path, single survivor. The survivor was a man named Cale Roan. He had launched from a world that was still learning to build its first orbital stations. He returned to a civilization that spanned 200 systems and maintained a fleet capable of reducing a star to plasma. Roan did not adjust. The scale overwhelmed him. The language had changed enough that he could not follow casual conversation. The technology was so far beyond his training that he could not operate a door panel without assistance. He lived for 6 years after his return, increasingly isolated, increasingly lost. He died by his own choice in a room in a city that had no place for him. His last recorded words were, "I came home, but home did not come back to me." Leon paused. The garden was quiet around them. After Roan, the Council of Remembrance, the body I now chair, created the Homecoming Protocol. Its purpose is not merely to welcome returning crews. It is to ensure that every returning crew member is met by someone whose entire function is to bridge the gap between the world they left and the world they returned to. A translator, a companion, a guide who understands both the old world and the new one well enough to stand between them. "That is my function, Commander. I am your bridge. I have studied the pre-expansion era for 60 years. I speak 3 reconstructed dialects of early English, including the Houston regional variant of 2089. I have read every document in the Meridian's mission file, every personal log your crew recorded before departure, every letter Alina wrote to the archive in the decades after you left. I know the names of your neighbors in Houston. I know the model of your first car. I know that you preferred black coffee and that you sang to yourself when you thought no one was listening." Sierra stared at her. You learned all of that for this. For you, specifically. The protocol maintains a roster of prepared bridges, one for every lost vessel that might theoretically return. My assignment has been the Meridian since I was 22 years old. I have spent my career preparing to meet you. I did not know if you would come. I prepared anyway. That is what we do. The weight of it was almost unbearable. Sierra looked at the garden, at the relics in their niches, at the city humming beyond the trees. A civilization that assigned a woman to spend 60 years preparing for a meeting that might never happen, because the alternative that someone came home and found no one waiting was a failure they had experienced once and refused to experience again. Cale Roan, Sierra said, is his name on the wall. Column 61. He came home, we failed him, we do not intend to fail again. Leon let the silence hold for a moment. Then she spoke again, her voice shifting to something warmer. There is something the homecoming protocol asks me to share with you next. It concerns your daughter. Sierra's throat tightened, she nodded. Elena Vasquez, born 2082 CE, Houston, Texas. She lived to the age of 91. She had 2 children, a son named Marco and a daughter named Sierra. After you. Marco became an engineer on the first Mars terraforming team. He designed the atmospheric processors that made the northern hemisphere breathable. The atmospheric model he developed is still in use, 46,000 years later on 17 terraformed worlds. It is called the Vasquez cycle. Sierra made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Marco named it after himself. His colleagues named it. He protested. He said the name belonged to his grandmother, the woman who went first. And the younger Sierra. She became a pilot. Long-range survey like her grandmother. She flew the Kessler mission to Tau Ceti in 2174. She came back. 6 more missions after that. Died at 84 on Earth in her own bed, surrounded by her children. She kept a logbook her entire career. Every entry began the same way. A line from the mission brief you left behind. The sentence about how exploration is the act of making the unknown into the known. That was not from my brief, Sierra said. That was something my instructor told me, David Chen. His name is on the wall too. Chen's words passed to you, passed to your granddaughter, carried into the Tau Ceti system and back. The archive traces lines like that. It calls them transmission chains, ideas that survive not because they are recorded, but because someone carries them in their chest and hands them to the next person. The Vasquez line had continued for 600 years, Leon told her, before it merged with the broader population through intermarriage. But the name persisted. The Vasquez cycle still powered terraforming operations. The logbook tradition the younger Sierra had started was still observed by long-range survey pilots. Every first entry began with a line from someone who had gone before, a transmission chain linking the newest pilot to the oldest. There are people alive today who carry the name Vasquez, Leon said. Some of them are here. She gestured toward the crowd at the garden's edge. A woman stepped forward, young, perhaps 30, dark-haired, with Sierra's own jawline unmistakable across millennia. She held the small holographic device. Up close, Sierra could see what it projected. Elena, age 7, standing in the yard of their house in Houston, holding a paper airplane, squinting into the sun. Sierra's knees buckled. The young woman caught her arm, steadied her with a grip that was strong and sure. The crowd did not surge forward. They stood, witnessing, giving her the space to feel what she needed to feel. How, Sierra whispered, how do you still have this? The archive, the young woman said. Her eyes were brown, the same brown as Sierra's, as Elena's. Every personal record from the pre-expansion era is preserved. Every photograph, letter, voice recording, birthday video, handwritten note. We keep them because they are us, because the people who made them are the reason we are here. Her name was Tova Vasquez-Len, structural engineer on the orbital defense platforms, the systems that ringed Earth like a crown of thorns disguised as a halo of light. She had traveled from Platform Seraph when the homecoming protocol activated 9 days ago. She had brought the photograph because the archive flagged it as the most accessed image in the Vasquez family file, the one Alina herself had uploaded, decades after it was taken, with a single annotation. My mother. Before. Before, the word landed like a fist, before the mission, before the departure, before the 47,000 years. Before Alina grew up without her mother, and named her daughter after the woman who never came home. But Sira had come home. She was standing here, holding the arm of a woman who carried her blood and her name, and the photograph of a 7-year-old girl who had once stood in a yard in Houston and thrown paper airplanes at the sky. I want to see the archive, Sira said. Of course, Leon said, but first one more thing. They walked to the western edge of the plaza, to a balcony overlooking the city and the bay. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows from the organic towers, turning the water to copper. From here Sira could see the full sweep of what humanity had built. Cities stretching to every horizon, organic towers humming with the wind, transit ribbons carrying people in silent streams of light, parks and waterways, orbital platforms bright as diamonds in the daytime sky, the warship's shadow crossing the landscape like the hand of a clock that measured epochs instead of hours. Below the balcony, a second landing platform was visible, larger than the one where the Meridian had touched down, with cradles designed for vessels far bigger than anything Sira's era had built. The cradles were empty, but the infrastructure around them was immaculate: power conduits glowing faintly, atmospheric processors cycling, guidance beacons pulsing in their housings. The platform had not been used recently, but it was maintained as if it might be used at any moment. How many landing platforms like that are there? Sira asked. 11,000 worldwide. Deepwater platforms, mountain platforms, Arctic platforms, equatorial platforms. Each one rated for vessels up to 8 kilometers in length. Each one maintained in operational condition at all times. For what? For whatever comes next. We do not predict specific threats. We maintain general readiness. The distinction matters. Prediction is a guess about the future. Readiness is a decision about the present. The Davari's last ambassador came 4,000 years ago, Leon continued. Before she left, she asked me why we had never expanded beyond our current borders. 912 systems. We could control tens of thousands. She wanted to know why we stopped. What did you tell her? That we were not expanding. We were deepening. That there is a difference between reaching farther and building stronger. That the species which endures is not the one that reaches farthest, it is the one that remembers what it is building for. Sira looked at the city below, at the people in the plaza behind her still gathering, at Tova with Alina's photograph, at the wall of departure on the cliff face, her name still glowing after 47,000 years, at the warship above, patient as geology. And what are you building for? Leon reached into her tunic and produced a small disk of the dark material, palm-sized. She held it out. Its surface was smooth, warm. When Sira took it, a light appeared: a single word in the Latin alphabet, the old script, the letters Sira's hands had learned to write in a classroom in Houston 47,000 years ago. Ready. Not for a specific enemy, Leon said. Not for a predicted threat, for readiness itself. For the certainty that when something comes, and something always comes, we will not be caught sleeping, or fighting each other, or looking the other way. We remember what it was like to be small. We remember what it was like to send our best people into the dark without knowing if they would come back. We remember every name on that wall. And we decided, a very long time ago, that we would never be unprepared again. The crowd in the plaza began to sing. Sira did not recognize the melody composed millennia after her departure, in a musical tradition beyond what her ear could parse. But she recognized the structure. Around, voices entering one by one, each carrying a different line, each line weaving into the others until the whole thing was a fabric of sound held together through tension and balance, and the willingness of each part to bear its share of the weight. She stood on the balcony and listened. The wind carried the song over the bay. The warship above moved through its orbit, unhurried, its shadow crossing the city. "There is a message for you in the archive," Leon said, her voice low, pitched for Sierra alone. "Elena recorded it on her 90th birthday, a year before she died. She asked the archive to hold it until you came home. She did not say if, she said until." The archive was beneath the city, embedded, not buried. The entrance was a doorway in the base of one of the organic towers, marked by the circle and line insignia. Inside, the air was cool and perfectly still. Walls of the dark material glowed with soft ambient light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Leon led her through corridors that branched and descended, past chambers holding holographic displays of star charts, timelines, family trees stretching hundreds of generations. The archive was not a museum. It was a living system, every record connected to every other record, every name linked to every name, the species' entire history woven into a searchable, cross-referenced, continuously maintained fabric of memory. Sierra passed a chamber where a young woman was sitting in a chair, eyes closed, a thin band of light around her temples. She was accessing the archive directly, not reading it, but experiencing it, living through a recorded moment from a century or a millennium ago, feeling what someone else had felt. "The archive is available to everyone," Leon said, noticing her gaze. "Any citizen can access any record any time. There are no restricted files, no classified histories, no sealed archives. The Council of Remembrance decided early that secrecy was the enemy of memory. What is hidden is eventually forgotten. What is open is eventually understood." They stopped at a junction where 3 corridors met. A display on the wall showed a schematic of the archive's structure, a branching network that extended beneath the city for kilometers, with nodes labeled in the old script and the new script side by side. Sierra could read the old labels: personal records, mission LOGS, cultural heritage, biological archive, defense history, diplomatic record. "How deep does it go?" she asked. "The physical archive extends 14 levels below the surface, but it is only a local node. There are archive nodes on every settled world, every orbital platform, every deep space outpost. They synchronize continuously. The full archive, the sum total of everything humanity has recorded, preserved, and maintained since the pre-expansion era, is distributed across 912 systems. No single event, no single attack, no single catastrophe could destroy it. We made certain of that." "Because of what happened to Rhone," Sierra said. "Because of what happened to Rhone, and because of what happened to the Davari. Their empire dissolved, and within 1,000 years they had lost 80% of their cultural records. Languages, art, history, science gone, not destroyed by an enemy, lost through neglect. They stopped maintaining their archives because the cost seemed unnecessary. By the time they realized what they had lost, it was too late. We watched it happen. We learned from it." They continued down the corridor and stopped in a small chamber with a single chair and a curved display surface that filled the far wall. Leon touched a panel. The display lit up with a face. Elena, not the 7-year-old from the photograph. Elena at 90, silver-haired, thin-faced, with the dark eyes Sierra saw in her own mirror every morning. She was sitting in a garden sunlight on green leaves behind her, looking directly into the recording device, with an expression that was neither sad nor happy, but something that had been waiting. Leon stepped back. "I will be outside." The door closed, and Sierra was alone with her daughter's face for the first time in 47,000 years. Elena spoke. "Hi, Mom. I know you probably cannot hear this. I know the relay collapsed and the meridian is probably gone and you are probably gone with it. But I am recording this anyway, because you taught me that preparation is not about probability. It is about character. I am 90 years old. Marco is 52 and building things on Mars you would not believe. Little Sierra, she is 48. She hates being called that, just got back from Tau Ceti. She flew. Like you flew. She has your hands and your stubbornness. She has that thing you used to do where you check every system 3 times before you trust it and then check again. When you left, I was angry. I was angry for a long time. Angry you chose the mission over me. Angry you did not say goodbye the way I needed. Angry the house was quiet, and you were not there to see me grow up. But I stopped being angry when I understood what you did. You went first. You went into the dark so the people after you would know what was there. You did not know if you would survive. You did not know if anyone would follow. You went anyway. And because you went, we learned things about the relay corridor that saved 3 other missions. Because you went, we reinforced the cryopods. Because you went, the Kessler mission made it to Tau Ceti and back with all 12 crew alive. You did not come home, but what you sent home, the data, the readings, the proof the corridor existed, that came home, and it mattered. I named my daughter after you, not because I missed you, though I did every day. Because I wanted her to know that going first is not the same as going alone, that the people who go first are carried by everyone who follows. If you are hearing this, then you came back. And if you came back, I want you to know, I am proud of you. I have been proud of you for 90 years. I will be proud of you for as long as anyone remembers the name Vasquez. Welcome home, Mom. The recording ended. The display dimmed to its ambient glow. Sierra sat in the chair in the quiet chamber beneath the city and pressed her palms against her eyes. She did not try to stop the tears. She let them come the way rain comes, not because anyone asks for it, but because the pressure has built past the point where the sky can hold it. She thought about Alina at 7, folding paper airplanes with her tongue between her teeth. She thought about Alina at 90, sitting in a garden, speaking to a mother she believed was dead, recording a message for a future she had decided to believe in anyway. The 90-year-old woman and the 7-year-old girl were the same person. The faith was the same faith. The fold of the paper airplane and the act of recording the message were the same gesture, the belief that precision matters, that preparation matters, that you build things carefully because the careful things are the ones that last. Above her the city hummed, the defense grid pulsed, the warship turned in its orbit. The spire in the plaza recorded another coordinate, another outpost, another line in the ledger of a species that measured its worth not by how far it reached, but by how much it remembered. After a long time she wiped her face. She stood. She opened the door. Leon was waiting. Tova beside her, Alina's photograph steady in her hands, the escort pilots at attention. Leon was waiting. Tova beside her, Alina's photograph steady in her hands, the escort pilots at attention. Beyond them the corridor stretched toward the surface, toward the city, toward the sky, toward everything humanity had become while one woman slept and dreamed of home. I have 11 crew members aboard the Meridian, Sierra said. Her voice was rough but level. They did not make it back alive, but they made it back. I want their names spoken. I want them brought home properly. Every one of them deserves what you gave me today. It will be done, Leon said. 17 families have already been contacted, descendants of the crew, traced through the lineage records. Most are on their way. And I want to meet them. Hernandez's family, Volkov's, Obi's, all of them. I want to tell them what their ancestors did, how they lived on that ship, how they faced the dark, how they died. What they said in the moments I was awake to hear it before the pods failed and the lights went out. The archive has already begun compiling the records, Leon said. Your testimony will be preserved alongside the crew's existing files. The families will hear it from you, and then every generation after will hear it from the archive. Sierra looked at Tova, at the photograph of Alina, 7 years old, paper airplane in hand, squinting into the Houston sun. She was right, Sierra said. About what? Tova asked. Going first, it is not the same as going alone. Tova looked at the photograph, then at Sira. The resemblance between them was uncanny, the jawline, the set of the eyes, the way they both stood with their weight slightly forward, as if ready to move. 47,000 years of genetic drift and intermarriage, and still the echo persisted. Not because genetics were that precise, but because the people who carried the Vasquez name had chosen, consciously or not, to carry the posture with it. The way of standing, the way of looking at the world as something to be met head-on. My grandmother told me something, Tova said. Her grandmother told her, and her grandmother told her, back and back through the chain. She said, the woman who went first did not go because she was not afraid. She went because she decided that what she could learn was worth more than what she might lose, and every generation since has tried to live up to that. I was terrified, Sira said, every minute, from the day I got the mission brief to the day I climbed into the pod. I know, Tova said, that is what makes it matter. Sira straightened her shoulders. She was a commander. She had a crew to account for, a daughter's legacy to honor, a civilization to learn, a language to remaster, a world to inhabit that was hers and not hers, familiar and foreign, old and new. She had 47,000 years of history to absorb and a bridge named Leon to help her cross the gap. She had a granddaughter's logbook tradition to learn about, and a terraforming cycle that bore her name, and a family that had kept her photograph in a digital archive for longer than most species existed. The planet hummed with the patience of a species that had taken 47,000 years to answer a single question, what are we building for? And had answered it the only way that mattered. By being here when she came home. Sira walked up the corridor toward the light. The city received her the way a river receives rain, quietly, completely, without interruption. The towers hummed their chord. The defense grid held its watch. The transit ribbons carried their silent cargo. The warship turned in the evening sky, its hull catching the last of the sun, its shadow long and steady on the water below. And on the cliff above the Chesapeake, the wall of departure glowed in the gathering dusk. 47,000 years of names held in the rock like promises kept, each one steady and patient and warm. The way a light is warm in a window left burning for someone who went away and was always expected to come home.